Hello, everyone, and welcome to another amazing episode of The Lion's Den. I'm your new host, Venezia Leone, and today we sit down with Steven Rothberg, who's the founder of The College Recruiter, a job search platform matching recent grads with employers. We talk about how Steven accidentally found his way into this industry all the way back in 1996. We talk about the different trends over time, specifically in the 2021 jobs were more accessible to now 2025, there's too many applicants and not enough jobs. We talk about different techniques recruiters can take in order to maximize their chances of hiring the best candidate for the job. And lastly, we just talk about some trends among large scale employers who are hiring recent grads well. Within the podcast, we have a couple comments about New York bodegas, if you're familiar. And it's a really, really insightful conversation. And I hope that you enjoy what Stephen has to share. Hey, Stephen, we're excited to have you on the Lion's Den today. I'd love to just hear a little bit about what got you into the space of early career hiring.
Yeah, Venezia, thanks. Accident. So I had started a micro business doing things like publishing campus maps, and that were distributed by schools to incoming students, to freshmen or first year students, as people in other areas of the world might call them. And we were trying to diversify the product mix, because the campus maps were doing a really good job of helping local retailers, apartment companies, restaurants, et cetera, reach those incoming students. So we wanted to add a publication that would help organizations reach the graduating students, the seniors. And the thing that graduating students need more than anything else is a job. And so one thing kind of led to another, looked at different options, printing and et cetera, and came up with an idea for an employment magazine. They were several dozen pages in length, ads in them from local, regional, national employers that were looking to hire mostly graduating seniors, provided the magazines for free to the career service offices. There were several hundred that distributed them nationwide. And we generated our revenue by selling the advertising. This was kind of mid 90s. And then this thing called the internet came along, and career service.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, I think it's a fad. Have fun with it. It's going to be, yesterday's news pretty soon. But the one thing kind of led to, so I went into a career service office at the University of Minnesota, where I went to school, and I live in Minneapolis. And the career service office director said to me that there's this thing called the internet. She thought that she had never been on it. In fact, she had, but people just didn't know it. They were using email, but they didn't really realize that was part of the internet. And that the students were using it to prepare for their on-campus interviews. So like if a Big Four accounting firm was coming on campus that day to interview, they would interview dozens of students. And some of those students, to get a bit of an advantage, would go into the career service office, into the file cabinets, and pull out the information on that, Big Four accounting firm or whoever it was that was interviewing. And that would then deny the other students the ability to kind of brush up and better understand the business that they were just about to interview with. But with a website, that's not much of an issue. You can't really, as a student or somebody interviewing, steal the company's information off of the web. So what we found when we started to look at it was that there were only a couple of hundred employment sites worldwide, job boards, as we now call them. And we were one of the very early ones. So we launched in November of 1996. And by 2000, our whole business had migrated away from print, and we were only online. So it's been a while.
Wow. That's awesome that you were following that when it was kind of like pre-internet and then post-internet. I mean, you've probably seen all different trends in terms of hiring from both sides. So rewinding a little bit to a few years ago, everyone was talking about a talent shortage, you know,
Yeah.
the job market, people were getting jobs so easily. Did you see that up close? Like, was that real? And how did that compare to maybe what you had seen in the 20 years leading up to that?
Yeah, for sure. You know, when we went into COVID, February, March of 2020, the employment market was pretty good. It was hot. So if you were a student or a recent graduate, unless you were doing something wrong or there was something really unusual about your background, for example, if you had a criminal conviction, then it was pretty likely that you were going to be able to find a job that was related to your desired occupational field. You know, it's like one thing to graduate with an engineering job and want a job as an engineer, but end up working as a barista. Nothing wrong with working as a barista unless that's not what you want to do. But in early 2000, the market was um, pretty good for both the candidates and the employers. The employers were also able to hire the people that they needed. So there was pretty good balance. And of course, that changed, you know, with a snap of a finger. From February to March to April of 2020, the market went from pretty good to just awful. Um, We'd seen that kind of thing before, actually. In 2008, 2009, with the financial collapse, led mostly by mortgages, we saw very much the same thing, where almost overnight, employers just let go a ton of people. They obliterated their talent acquisition teams, and it took them years to come back. Where we're at today is a lot healthier, but it feels in a lot of ways like a house of cards that, you know, one good wind, and the whole thing will come tumbling down. So there's, for most students and most grads in most majors, they should be able to find a job that is of interest to them. Not as much as, say, 2021 or 2022, when the labor market was just really hot and employers just were hoarding talent and they just couldn't hire people quickly enough. But over the long term, if you look back 10 years, 20 years, where we're at today is actually pretty normal for most sectors. Not all of them, but for most of them.
Okay. I think that's good to hear for any current college students who might be listening to the podcast. Um, a question about kind of the myth of more, in a sense of, is it good for job, like people who are posting jobs, is it good for them to be receiving too many applications, or how do you kind of see that trend moving forward with, from the perspective of a job posting?
Yeah. Too few or too many always is going to be bad, right? Like, kind of by definition. If But what too few is to one employer might be too many to another. If you're trying to hire one person versus 50 people, you just need a different number of applications. So what I'm seeing right now is, without a doubt, the average role is generating far more applications than it did a couple of years ago. What I'm also seeing is that far more of those applications look to be well qualified. And I think that's the piece that isn't getting talked about enough, and I think really should. So almost every employer that is of medium size or larger, so hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of employees, almost all of them use applicant tracking systems, ATS. And almost all of those allow the employer to score or rank applicants automatically. Almost all of those are using AI or machine learning to do that. What we're seeing is, in the industry, in the job board industry, talent acquisition, is that if in 2022 an opening might have generated, say, 20 applications, today it's probably generating 40, 50, 60. So there's no doubt there are more applicants per average opening. But when I'm talking to TA people, Their bigger frustration isn't actually the number of applications that they're receiving, because the ranking should allow them to kind of zero in on the ones that are well qualified.
Hmm.
Their frustration is that a far higher percentage of them appear to be well qualified, and they're blaming AI for that. And there's probably some truth to that.
Mm.
I think what's happening is it's not so much that candidates are falsifying their resumes, making up work, making up educational experience. I think what's happening is that a lot more candidates are using tools like Gemini and Claude and ChatGPT to help them write their resumes better. It's like if you went before AI to your older sibling, your cousin, whatever, and said to them, "Hey, you're a professional resume writer. Can you look at my resume and improve it?" They would, and it would be a lot better. Now, everybody has that older sibling or cousin at their fingertips, and they're all writing, or mostly writing, much better resumes. So, 3, 4, 5 years ago, an employer might receive your resume and it was poorly written, and they would think that you were not qualified for the role because you had done such a bad job of writing it. Today, thanks to Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, etc., your resume is well written and does a good job of communicating your credentials. And so that same candidate applying to that same role seems to be better qualified. So 3 years ago, if they received 20 resumes, maybe six, seven, eight looked to be qualified. Today, they might be getting 40 resumes, and probably 30 of them look to be well qualified. So the difference between seven, eight well qualified candidates and 30 well qualified candidates, that's where I think the pain is coming in. So the employers are they're continuing to look at the well qualified resumes, but there are a lot more of those. We're getting into this battle of the bots, where the AI used by the employers is fighting it out with the AI used by the candidates.
Yeah. From putting on your kind of other side of the marketplace hat on from a college student's perspective,
Hmm.
is this good? Like, is this positive that more individuals have access to the tools that allow them to look for jobs they are actually qualified for, but previously might have just not been able to articulate it correctly?
Yeah, I think it depends on who you are. So if you were one of those students who was fortunate enough to have that older sibling or cousin who could help you write your resume really well, this is awful for you, because now you've got a lot more competition. Um,
Mm.
but it's leveled the playing field, and I think we're seeing in the workplace that AI has that same impact. AI isn't helping um, people who are really good at their jobs become a lot better, but what it is doing is helping people who were sort of mediocre at their jobs become a lot better. So it's sort of
Mm.
bringing up the bottom, if you will, more than elevating the top. It's leveling that playing field. So I think for most students who weren't fortunate enough to have that resume writing an expert on speed dial, this is a good thing. It's giving them a better opportunity to land that job that they actually were always qualified for, well qualified for, but just weren't communicating that well. The problem is that for all candidates, there are fewer roles available. The employers are hiring fewer people, and there is more competition for those roles. So, 3 years ago, you would have had a much better chance with a well written resume of landing that job you want. Today, you've got a lot more people with well written resumes chasing after a fewer number of jobs. So there's added competition.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to the side of the talent acquisition team,
Yeah.
I have 30 resumes. They're all qualified. What types of recommendations or what processes have you seen that have been effective? I know you've mentioned the CPC and CPA models. Maybe let our listeners know what that means and what you've seen work.
Yeah, sure. So I'll tackle the first part of your question first, like just sort of generally what's working, and then I'll get into the CPC CPA part because it is definitely closely tied. I'm glad you're kind of linking those. One of the things that I do see some TA people doing this, until they're all doing this, it's not enough. But that is, if you've got a role that you know historically that you should need probably, and I'm just making up a number here, you should need 50 people to apply to it so that you can get maybe 20 candidates who are qualified and 10 who are well qualified, and that you'll end up hiring one of them. So on average, you want to get 50 applications. If you kind of look at the range, average just means that half is less, half is more. So if it's normally or an average of 50 applications in order to hire the candidate you need, maybe 75 is a safe number where you just know, hey, if I get 75 people applying to this job, I know with almost total certainty that I'm going to be able to hire the person I need. Then set up your ATS. They can almost all be configured this way so that you stop receiving applications when you get to 75. I see these stories on LinkedIn day after day after day. We got 300 resumes. We got 1,000 resumes. We got 3,000 resumes. That's not the fault of the candidate. That's not the fault of the labor market. That's your fault. It's the fault of the TA department for not using a feature that's built into their ATS that's available for free, where they just automatically turn off or inactivate the rule when they've reached an acceptable number of applications. Now, some TA people will say, but I don't want to do that because I want to make sure that I hire the best person. And if I cut it off at some arbitrary number like that, suppose the best candidate would have been the 76th person to apply. Well, the reality is employers don't hire the best candidate. They hire the best candidate who has applied within a certain time frame. So all you're doing is shortening that time frame. They don't even hire often the best candidate. They hire the first candidate who appears to be qualified enough to do the job, and the risk of them not doing the job well is pretty low. So kind of like the first acceptable candidate that walks through the door tends to get the job. If you wait for every possible candidate in the world to apply, or you don't have any kind of deadline, or you use some sort of other arbitrary number like 30 days, then what ends up happening is if a well-qualified candidate applied right away, by the time you get back to them with an interview offer or even a job offer, they've probably already decided not to work for you because you're so slow. They've probably decided to work for the employer across the street. So speed matters. If you take too long, yeah, you might get a candidate who seems to be better qualified, but you're going to lose the candidates at the beginning who actually might have been better qualified. So it's you do want to cut it off when you've received a certain number of applications. Now, the way that CPC and CPA fit into that, CPC is cost per click. When a job board or some other sourcing tool sends the candidate to your ATS, that's usually the click that you pay for, and you might pay 50 cents, 75 cents, $1.25 for that. CPA is cost per application. In the consumer marketing world, that's going to be cost per acquisition. And that's a candidate who has successfully applied to the job. Again, it's usually measured when they apply on the ATS. Not always. It can also be on the job board. And again, you can have a budget for that. You can go to the job board that you're working with or job boards and say that you only want to pay for maybe 200 clicks or 50 applications. So as soon as you've received enough applications, you turn that off. If you're a medium or large employer, there's a really good chance that you're advertising that job across a lot of different job boards. It might be on LinkedIn, it might be on Indeed, it might be on College Recruiter, it might be on, 5 different job boards, 10, 20, whatever. And that's where programmatic technology comes into play. And at College Recruiter, we have lots of customers who are programmatically posting their jobs to us. And it just means there's basically software, the computer is deciding where that ad runs the best, what the response rate is the best, and also when to turn it off, when to stop receiving clicks, when to stop receiving applications. And it does it automatically so that the recruiter doesn't have to spend time looking at different requisitions on their ATS every day to decide, I think we've had enough applications for this one. I'm going to turn that one off. And I think we need more for this one. So I'm going to send it to another job board or give them more budget. It can be all automated, and it's not expensive technology to use.
Awesome. So it sounds like that's a way that these job postings can be controlled if they don't want to use, or maybe even in addition to turning it off after 75 applicants,
Yeah.
they also can use this as a way to make sure that the 75 applicants they are getting are best targeted in the right channels and to the right individuals.
Yeah, exactly. And there's nothing saying that you can't reopen the requisition, right? I mean, if you turn it off after 5 days and then you go through the 75 applications and there are only 3 good ones there, turn it back on. Bring in another 75 applicants.
Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely seen in just my personal job search process the roles opening and closing and being reposted and all that kind of thing. So that's helpful to have the insight into how that works.
They just clearly it's like, if we're gonna get applicants like her, then we better open this up again and get some actually good people in here.
Shh, you're not supposed to tell people that. This is gonna be online.
It's just between the two of us.
I love it. Okay, so I want to spend a couple minutes talking about the College Recruiter. What is it, and is there a way for people to kind of get involved in the platform, and how do you build these partnerships? Just would love for you to tell us about it.
Yeah. So our mantra, our slogan is that at College Recruiter, we believe that every student and recent graduate deserves a great career, and that it should be easy and inexpensive for employers to hire them. So we're a job search site. Think Indeed, LinkedIn, ZipRecruiter, etc. But we're niche. We focus on a particular niche or segment of the candidate audience, and that is early careers. We define that as anybody that has 0 to 5 years of experience. So pretty much every single student and recent graduate of any college or university would fall into that. But also people who are transitioned out of the military, people who are changing careers, people who maybe they stayed at home with their kids for 10 years and they're getting back into the workforce. Almost all of those sorts of folks would also fall into that early careers. We're also global. We have employers that are working with us in dozens of countries worldwide, and heavily programmatic, as we were just talking about, where employers mostly post to us through software, whether it's through their ATS or some kind of third party like an Appcast, Veritone, etc., on a cost per click, cost per application basis. We do have some that advertise on a what we call a traditional duration basis, and that would be like, X dollars for Y days. So some job boards might charge, say, $200 for a posting that runs for 30 days. Others, you might buy a package. Maybe you buy 50 postings, or you post for, as many postings as you want for 3 months. The different business models vary widely. But what most of our employer customers use us for are the early career roles that tend to be high volume, where that employer is hiring dozens, hundreds, or thousands a year. If you're, I think you said that you're in New York City, so you're well familiar with bodegas, like the little corner grocery store, right?
Oh, yeah.
Where you can pay for like pay far too much for spoiled food that you didn't really want to begin with. And you right now you're probably picturing your meal on Tuesday. But anyway, the um, your typical small employer, they might hire like one or two people a year. Quite frankly, we're not the best place for that. We're not a good place for that. You're much better off at Indeed, ZipRecruiter, et cetera. They're really good at that kind of stuff. What we're really good at are employers that are large, Fortune 1000 companies, government agencies, and others that are hiring dozens, hundreds. Our systems are just really well set up so that we can drive, hundreds or thousands to those roles. So we'll often have an employer advertising dozens or hundreds of different roles with us in a whole bunch of different locations. Sometimes it's in 7 different countries in the EU. Sometimes it's in 13 different cities in the US. It really varies dramatically, employer to employer.
Yeah, that's an interesting niche because I definitely feel like on a lot of the other job boards, there are kind of one-offs or it'll say multiple levels, but really only Google and some of those bigger companies are the ones that you scroll through and you see, 30 different job postings for that sort of thing.
Yeah, and those job boards, I mean, for the employer that has like one opening here, one opening there is nothing wrong with that, right? But you
Oh,
wouldn't go into McDonald's if you're looking for like a really fancy meal. There's nothing wrong with McDonald's. You can go in and you can get your inexpensive, pretty simple meal. But if you're looking for something bigger,
you go
better,
to the bodega.
then you go to the bodega. Exactly. and you get Tuesday's lasagna on Thursday. Exactly.
I love it. Okay, so thinking about kind of like industry trends in the future, what are you seeing these large scale companies do right besides the couple tactics that we've talked about on this call? And yeah, what are some innovative approaches like to handle this market that you've seen?
Yeah. One of the things I'm the most excited about is sort of, it's rare today, but I don't think it's very far away from really becoming mainstream. And that is AI that benefits not just the employer from an efficiency standpoint, saving them money, but AI that benefits the employer and the candidate from an effectiveness standpoint, truly making better matches. Anthropic, one of the big AI companies, has recently been very transparent about how AI today does a really poor job of explaining how or why it's reaching a particular decision. So you can go into ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, and you can basically ask the AI to solve a problem and then ask the AI how it arrived at that. And it will give you an answer that seems right. And it's just making it up. It's kind of like if I go to you and say, hey, 2 weeks ago, you crossed the street at that corner instead of another corner. Why did you do that? You could give me a reason, but it's really unlikely that you're going to be able to remember exactly what you were thinking at that moment in time. And that's what's happening with a lot of these AI hiring systems, is that they will make stuff up as to why this candidate was ranked higher than the other candidate. I think we're close to the point where there's actually going to be like a true audit trail, and the AI will actually keep track of the decisions that it's making as it's making them, and then be able to share that not just with the employer, but also the candidate. And then if the AI shares that with you and you can see that, hey, you've got 2 years of sales experience, but the employer really wanted 3 or more, then the AI can tell you that. And then you have the opportunity to go, well, wait a second. My resume says 2023 to 2025. That's not 2 years because it was January of 23 to December of 2025. So that's 3 years. And so you can kind of inform the AI that the decisions it was making about you were flawed. Here's why. Have it reconsider you. Employers should love that because it's going to mean that they're going to get better qualified candidates. On the employer side, right now, all the emphasis has just been on cost savings. and at the cost of or detriment of them not hiring the best people. And I've seen this year after year after year in HR. It's viewed as a cost center by most employers. And so, therefore, they just are always looking for ways of spending less. It's okay to spend less, but not at the cost of hiring the best people and retaining those people. And I think that AI should help us surface that better, or improve on that process. Some of the chatbot products, like Paradox is probably the market leader in this respect, and there are a bunch of other ones as well. They're great because they can do kind of an online interview with you and ask you some
Mhm.
questions about your credentials, whether it's a resume or whether you don't even have a resume and you're just applying for like an hourly job. It's like, hey, Venezia, have you done this? Are you interested in that? Is this career goal line up with you? Our work environment is this way. Does that sound good to you? Why? And I think that that's going to help employers and candidates create better matches.
Yeah. And it sounds like adding some automation to the screener process,
Hmm.
which is going to improve I have 30 applications and I only have time to screen 10 people, right? It sounds like AI can really be helpful in improving that process.
Yeah, if it, and I'm happy about that if the candidate gets a choice, and it's a choice between talking to good AI and talking
Hmm.
to a good recruiter. If you can talk to good AI right now, a lot of candidates will choose that, but they shouldn't have to give up the opportunity to talk to a good recruiter tomorrow. And what a lot of organizations are doing is that they're giving the candidate, I think, a false choice. You can either talk to okay AI right now, or never talk to a good recruiter. And that's just not a good outcome. Organizations that have been unable or unwilling to invest in their people, in their recruiters, I'm really skeptical that they're going to suddenly be able and willing to invest in good AI. I think the organizations that have had bad recruiting practices in the past will continue to have bad recruiting practices. It's just going to be done by AI instead of humans. And that's because of the leadership in those organizations. But the organizations that have done a good job of recruiting, look out, because they're about to turbocharge it.
Well, clearly you've seen this industry go from magazines to automated AI. So I'll be on the lookout for you making a potential AI solution for recruitment as your next gig. But Steven, this conversation was so fun today. Really enjoyed your insight on everything. If you're listening and hiring early career talent or just trying to avoid being overwhelmed, definitely check out the College Recruiter. And thanks for being here on the Lions Den.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.